When I found out my boss gambled away the family restaurant, I left in tears. But then my family stepped in. My name is Emma Johnson. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how a single moment turned my entire world upside down. I never thought the place I loved most, and the person I trusted like a father, could disappear so fast. If you've ever faced a shocking betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe, because this journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The restaurant wasn't just a job for me. Ever since I could remember, it was my second home. Growing up, I watched my parents and everyone else on the team pour their hearts into every meal. The laughter from the tables, the smell of fresh bread, the comfort of familiar faces. It shaped who I am. Maybe you also have a place that feels like part of your soul. I always thought our little restaurant would last forever, but I couldn't see how close we were to losing everything. My boss, Mr. Carter, meant more to me than just the boss. He took me under his wing when I was young, teaching me how to cook, how to talk to people, how to care. To me, he was family. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. There were rumors, whispers of late-night gambling and unpaid bills, but I never believed it. Have you ever ignored the signs because you trusted someone so much? Keep watching, because what happened next shocked me to my core. One Thursday afternoon, in front of everyone, a man in a suit held up a sign that read, "Closed due to bankruptcy." My hands trembled, my heart hammered, and all I could do was stare at the place I called home. The world seemed to freeze. I felt empty, like the floor had dropped out from under me. It's moments like these that make you question everything, your choices, your loyalty, even who you are. If you've ever lost something that mattered, share your story below and let's help each other through it. But that's when I realized the depth of the betrayal. Mr. Carter hadn't just run into bad luck. He had gambled away everything. The restaurant, our memories, our community. It felt like being stabbed in the back by someone you'd protect with your life. I shut myself in the kitchen, tears rolling down my cheeks, replaying every memory. Could I ever forgive him? What would you do in my place? Stick around because things took a turn I never expected. After the tears stopped, the real pain started, the emptiness. If you've ever been hit with a shocking loss, you'll understand what I mean. And if you're still watching, leave a like so I know you're here with me on this journey. The next few days felt like walking through fog. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't even think straight. Without the restaurant, who was I? My entire identity had been wrapped up in those kitchen walls, in the sound of sizzling pans and happy customers. Now it was just nothing. I started questioning everything about my life. Had I wasted years believing in something that was built on lies? Mr. Carter's gambling addiction wasn't new. I learned later that he'd been hiding it for almost 2 years. 2 years of fake smiles while he destroyed everything we worked for. I replayed every conversation, every moment, searching for clues I'd missed. Maybe I was blind, or maybe I just didn't want to see the truth. Either way, the guilt ate at me like poison. The void felt endless. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. out of habit, ready to prep for the morning shift, then remember there was no shift anymore. My apartment felt like a cage. Friends texted, but I ignored them. What could they possibly say that would fix this? Some losses cut so deep that words feel meaningless. I spent hours staring at old photos from the restaurant. Birthdays we celebrated, holidays we shared, moments that now felt like distant dreams from another life. Money became a problem fast. I had some savings, but not enough to last more than a month or two. The restaurant had been my stability, my income, my purpose. Now I had bills piling up and no clear path forward. I applied to a few other restaurants, but my heart wasn't in it. How could I walk into another kitchen and pretend to care? It felt like betraying the only place that ever mattered. Have you ever felt so lost that even simple decisions become impossible? But the worst part wasn't the financial stress or the identity crisis. It was the loneliness. I realized how much of my social life revolved around that restaurant. The team was my family. Now they were scattered, looking for new jobs, new lives. I felt abandoned, even though I knew they were hurting too. One night, sitting alone in my dark apartment, I hit rock bottom. I thought about giving up on everything, but then something unexpected happened that changed everything. You'll want to keep watching, because this is where my story takes a shocking turn. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. If you've stuck with me this far, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. Trust me, what comes next will blow your mind, and I need you here for every twist. 2 weeks after the bankruptcy announcement, I got a call from an unknown number. It was a man named Derek Walsh, and he introduced himself as the new owner of the restaurant. Apparently, he'd bought the property at auction for pennies on the dollar. My heart jumped. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope. Maybe he'd reopen and bring us all back. I was so wrong. Derek wasn't interested in preserving what we'd built. He was a businessman, cold and calculated, who saw the restaurant as nothing more than an investment opportunity. When I met him at the property, he barely looked at me. He walked through the dining room like he was inspecting a piece of machinery, pointing out inefficiencies and outdated decor. Everything Mr. Carter and I had poured our souls into, he dismissed with a wave of his hand. It felt like watching someone trash your childhood home. Derek had plans to modernize the place, which really meant stripping away everything that made it special. He wanted to fire most of the old staff, change the menu entirely, and rebrand it as some trendy fusion concept. When I tried to explain the restaurant's history, the community connections, the legacy, he cut me off. "That's the past," he said coldly. "I'm focused on profit margins and market trends." In that moment, I realized he didn't care about people or memories, only money. It was Mr. Carter's gambling all over again, just in a different package. He offered me a position as a line cook, not head chef, not even sous chef, but a basic line cook at minimum wage. After 7 years of dedication, after building that kitchen from the ground up, he wanted me to start from scratch under his command. The disrespect burned like fire in my chest. Part of me wanted to throw it back in his face and walk out right then. But another part, the desperate, scared part, wondered if I should take it. At least it would be income. At least I'd still be connected to the place somehow, even if it wasn't the same. I took a week to think about his offer, but every day felt heavier. My family noticed I was falling apart. My sister Rachel called constantly, begging me to talk. My mom showed up at my door with homemade meals I barely touched. They could see I was drowning, but I didn't know how to ask for help. I felt ashamed, like I'd failed somehow. Derek represented everything I hated: greed, coldness, the destruction of something beautiful for profit. But I was running out of options, and the walls were closing in. What would you do if you had to choose between your dignity and your survival? The answer came in the most unexpected way. And what happened next changed my entire perspective on family, loyalty, and what it means to fight back. The loneliness hit differently when you're surrounded by silence. I spent days alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment that led to this disaster. The routine I'd built over 7 years was gone, and I didn't know how to fill the emptiness. I'd wake up with nowhere to go, no purpose, no direction. It's a special kind of torture when the thing that gave your life meaning just vanishes overnight. Every hour felt like a week, and every week felt like a lifetime of regret and confusion. Fighting this battle alone was suffocating. I had no one who truly understood what I was going through. Sure, my family tried to help, but they'd never worked in that restaurant. They didn't know what it felt like to lose not just a job, but a home, a family, a piece of yourself. I tried reaching out to my former coworkers, but most of them had already moved on. New jobs, new chapters, new lives. They were healing, and I was stuck. Have you ever felt like you're drowning while everyone else is swimming away? That's exactly where I was. The financial pressure crushed me from every angle. Rent was due, bills were stacking up, and my savings account was bleeding dry. I applied to 12 different restaurants in 3 weeks. Some never called back. Others offered positions that paid barely enough to survive. One manager actually laughed when I told him I'd been a head chef, said I was overqualified for their kitchen. How does being good at your job become a disadvantage? I started questioning if I'd ever work in a real kitchen again. Frustration turned into anger, and anger turned into bitterness. I blamed Mr. Carter for being weak, for letting his addiction destroy us. I blamed Derek for being heartless and greedy. I blamed myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for being too loyal, too trusting. too naive. Late at night, I'd pace my apartment, imagining confrontations I'd never have, arguments I'd never win. My mind became a prison of what-ifs and should-haves. The worst part? I couldn't even cry anymore. I was too exhausted, too numb, too broken. But something inside me refused to completely give up. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was that tiny spark of hope that refuses to die even in the darkest moments. I didn't know what my next move would be, but I knew I couldn't stay in this darkness forever. I needed something, anything, to pull me out of this hole. And just when I thought I'd have to crawl out alone, my family showed me what real support looks like. What happened next reminded me that sometimes the people who love you see your strength even when you've forgotten it exists. Everything shifted one Sunday afternoon when my entire family showed up at my door unannounced. My mom, my dad, my sister Rachel, my brother Marcus, all of them standing there with serious faces and grocery bags full of food. Before you think this is just another family dinner story, hit that like button and subscribe, because what my family did next was the turning point that saved my life, and you need to hear how real support can change everything when you're at your lowest point. They didn't come to lecture me or tell me to get over it. They came to listen. We sat around my small living room, and for the first time in weeks, I opened up completely. I told them about the bankruptcy, about Derek's disrespectful offer, about the sleepless nights and the crushing weight of feeling worthless. My mom held my hand while tears finally came again. My dad, usually a man of few words, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Emma, that restaurant doesn't define you. Your talent, your heart, your passion, that's who you are, and no one can take that away." Those words cracked something open inside me. Rachel, my younger sister, had always been my biggest cheerleader. She reminded me of all the times I'd fought through challenges before. Culinary school when everyone doubted me. The first year at the restaurant when I worked 16-hour days to prove myself. The time I created a new menu that brought in twice the customers. "You've always been a fighter," she said. "This is just another round, and you're not losing this one." Her confidence in me was contagious. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost. Hope. Marcus, my older brother who ran his own construction business, brought a practical perspective. He talked about how he'd almost lost everything during the 2020 pandemic, how he'd rebuilt from scratch, how failure wasn't the end, but a redirection. "The universe is pushing you toward something bigger," he said. "Maybe this restaurant closing is clearing the path for something you never imagined." I wanted to believe him, but doubt still lingered. Could something good really come from this nightmare? He promised to help however he could, financially, emotionally, practically. Knowing I wasn't alone anymore changed everything. That evening, we cooked together in my tiny kitchen. Nothing fancy, just pasta and laughter and stories. It reminded me why I fell in love with cooking in the first place. It wasn't about the restaurant or the accolades or even Mr. Carter's approval. It was about connection, about bringing people together, about creating moments that matter. My family gave me more than support that day. They gave me back my purpose. As they left that night, my mom whispered, "We're not letting you fall, sweetheart. Whatever comes next, we're doing it together." And that's when I realized, maybe I didn't need to save the old restaurant. Maybe I needed to build something new. But first, I had to face the painful truth about who I'd become and what I'd lost along the way. 3 days after that family dinner, my dad asked me to take a walk with him. We ended up at the park where he used to take me as a kid, sitting on the same bench we'd sat on countless times before. He didn't rush into advice or solutions. He just asked me to tell him about my favorite memory from the restaurant. At first, I didn't want to go there. Those memories hurt too much. But he insisted, so I told him about the night we fed 50 homeless people on Thanksgiving, how we stayed late and cooked with our hearts, how Mr. Carter cried watching everyone eat. It was one of the purest moments of my life. My dad listened quietly, then asked another question. "What made you feel alive that night?" I thought about it. It wasn't the praise or the recognition. It was the impact, the connection, the feeling that what I did mattered beyond just serving food. "That's your power, Emma," he said. "That feeling doesn't live in a building or with a boss. It lives in you. Mr. Carter's mistakes can't touch that. His words hit me like lightning. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost that I forgot what I still had. My skills, my passion, my ability to create something meaningful. We talked for hours about my journey. He reminded me of the little girl who used to stand on a stool in our kitchen, determined to flip pancakes like a pro. The teenager who worked 3 jobs to pay for culinary school. The young woman who walked into that restaurant with fire in her eyes and a dream in her heart. Somewhere along the way, I'd let Mr. Carter's approval become my validation. I'd let the restaurant become my identity instead of just a chapter in my story. "You gave that place everything," my dad said, "but you're still here, and you still have everything that made you great." That conversation shifted something fundamental inside me. I realized I'd been mourning the wrong thing. Yes, the restaurant closing hurt. Yes, Mr. Carter's betrayal was painful. But what I was really grieving was the version of myself I thought I needed to be. The loyal employee, the dedicated chef who never questioned, who never dreamed beyond those 4 walls. Maybe this loss was breaking me open so something stronger could emerge. Maybe I needed to lose everything I thought I was to discover who I could become. Have you ever had a conversation that completely changed your perspective on your own pain? As we walked back, my dad put his arm around my shoulder and said something I'll never forget. "Emma, you didn't lose your purpose. You just outgrew the container it was in." That night, I pulled out my old culinary school notebooks, my recipe journals, my dreams I'd tucked away years ago. I started writing ideas, concepts, visions for what I really wanted to create. Not Mr. Carter's restaurant, not Derek's trendy fusion concept, but something authentically mine. I didn't know how it would happen yet, but for the first time since the bankruptcy, I felt like myself again. And that feeling was about to lead me to the most important decision of my life. Rebuilding yourself is harder than rebuilding a business. If you're going through your own reconstruction right now, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and smash the like, because I'm about to share exactly how I crawled out of the darkest period of my life. And these lessons might be exactly what you need to hear right now. So stick with me through this journey. I started with small, concrete steps. First, I created a routine again. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd wake up, make coffee, and spend an hour writing in my journal. Gratitude, goals, feelings, anything to get my mind straight. Then I'd cook something new, experimenting with recipes I'd never tried before. These weren't for anyone else. They were for me, to remember why I loved this craft in the first place. Structure gave me stability when everything else felt chaotic. It sounds simple, but sometimes the simplest things save us when we're falling apart. Second, I stopped avoiding my former coworkers. I reached out to Maria, who'd been our sous chef for 5 years. We met for coffee, and she told me she'd been struggling too, working at a corporate chain restaurant that treated her like a robot. Then I called Tommy, our head waiter, who was bartending at a place he hated. One by one, I reconnected with the people who'd made that restaurant special. We shared our pain, our anger, our confusion, but we also shared something else, the desire to create something better, something that honored what we'd built together. These conversations planted seeds I didn't even realize were growing. Third, I had to forgive Mr. Carter. Not for him, for me. Holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. I wrote him a letter I never sent, pouring out everything I felt, the betrayal, the hurt, the disappointment, but also the gratitude for what he'd taught me. Addiction had destroyed him, but it didn't have to destroy me too. Letting go of that resentment freed up space in my heart for new possibilities. It's strange how forgiveness works. It doesn't erase the past, but it stops the past from erasing your future. Fourth, I invested in myself. I took an online business course about restaurant management and finance. I attended workshops about sustainable cooking and farm-to-table concepts. I read books about entrepreneurs who'd built empires from nothing. Knowledge became my armor against fear. Every new thing I learned made me feel more capable, more confident, more ready for whatever came next. I realized I'd spent years being excellent at cooking but terrible at understanding the business side. That gap had made me vulnerable, dependent, powerless. Never again. Within 6 weeks of that conversation with my dad, I was a different person. Not healed completely. Healing isn't linear, but stronger, clearer, more focused. I'd gone from someone who couldn't get out of bed to someone with a vision and a plan. My family noticed the change. Rachel said my eyes looked alive again. Marcus offered to help me with business planning. My mom started introducing me to people in her network who might be able to help. The universe responds to energy, and I was finally putting out the right signal. But I still had one massive obstacle in front of me: Derek Walsh and his takeover of the restaurant. What I decided to do about that would determine everything that came next. And trust me, you won't believe how this situation unfolded. The idea came to me at 3 a.m, the way all crazy ideas do. What if I didn't work for Derek? What if I competed with him? What if I opened my own restaurant and showed him what real passion and community could build? It sounded insane. I had barely any savings left, no investors, no business experience. But I also had something Derek would never have: the loyalty of our old customers, the trust of our community, and a team of talented people who wanted to create something meaningful. The more I thought about it, the more it felt right. This wasn't just about saving a building. This was about proving that heart beats money every single time. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Maria, Tommy, and 3 other former staff members. We met at a coffee shop, and I laid out my vision. I wanted to open a new restaurant. Smaller, more intimate, focused on locally sourced ingredients and community connection. A place where people felt like family, not customers. At first, they looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Emma, we don't have money for that," Maria said gently. But then Tommy jumped in. "What if we all invested what we could? Pool our resources, share the ownership, build it together." Suddenly, the impossible started feeling possible. We spent the next 2 weeks crunching numbers, scouting locations, and dreaming bigger than any of us had in years. Marcus helped us create a business plan that actually made sense. Rachel designed mock-ups of what the space could look like. My parents spread the word through their network, and suddenly people were reaching out, offering to help, to invest small amounts, to be part of something real. We found a small space on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, but it had good bones and rent we could afford. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, had been a regular at our old restaurant. When she heard our story, she gave us the first 3 months at half price. Taking that first real action, signing the lease, was terrifying and exhilarating. My hand shook as I wrote my name on the contract. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real, binding, something I couldn't take back. We were all in, risking everything we had left on a vision that might fail. But standing there with my team, with people who believed in the same things I did, I felt more alive than I had in months. We weren't just opening a restaurant. We were reclaiming our story, our purpose, our power. Derek could have the old building. We were building something new. The work started immediately. We spent 12-hour days cleaning, painting, building. Every one of us wore multiple hats. I was chef, manager, plumber, and janitor all at once. We couldn't afford contractors, so we learned on YouTube and made mistakes and fixed them ourselves. It was exhausting, messy, and absolutely beautiful. For the first time since Mr. Carter's betrayal, I felt in control of my own destiny. We named the restaurant The Second Chapter, because that's exactly what it was for all of us. But just when everything seemed to be coming together, reality hit us with challenges I never saw coming, and our dream almost died before it even began. Nothing worth having comes easy, and opening this restaurant proved that every single day. If you've been following my journey this far, I need you to hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what I'm about to share are the brutal truths about chasing your dreams that nobody talks about. And if you're building something of your own, you need to hear this so you don't make the same mistakes I did. Our first major crisis hit 3 weeks before opening. The equipment supplier we'd ordered from went bankrupt. Yes, another bankruptcy, as if the universe was testing my resolve. We'd already paid half up front, and that money was just gone. No refund, no equipment, no way to cook without industrial stoves and refrigerators. I broke down in the empty kitchen space, sobbing like I hadn't cried since the day I learned about Mr. Carter's gambling. Maria found me there and didn't say anything. She just sat beside me and cried too. We were so close, and now it felt like everything was falling apart again. But Marcus came through in ways I never expected. He had a friend who ran a restaurant supply business, and when Marcus explained our situation, this man, a complete stranger named David, agreed to lease us equipment at cost until we could afford to buy. No credit check, no massive deposit, just faith in our vision and trust in my brother's word. It reminded me that good people still exist, that kindness isn't dead, that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. We scraped together enough to make the first payment, and suddenly we were back on track. But the stress had taken its toll on all of us. The second challenge was internal. Tommy and Maria got into a massive argument about the menu pricing. Tommy wanted to keep prices low to build customer loyalty. Maria argued we needed higher prices to actually make a profit. The fight got heated, personal, painful. For a moment, I thought our partnership would explode before we even opened. I had to step in and mediate, reminding them why we started this in the first place. We weren't just co-workers anymore. We were co-owners, partners, family. We had to learn to disagree without destroying each other. Eventually, we found a compromise that honored both perspectives, but it taught me that shared dreams don't eliminate conflict. They just raise the stakes. The third challenge was my own self-doubt. 2 days before opening, I woke up paralyzed by fear. What if nobody came? What if the food wasn't good enough? What if we failed and lost everything we'd invested? What if Derek's restaurant succeeded and ours flopped? The weight of everyone's trust in me felt crushing. I'd convinced these people to risk their savings, their time, their futures on my vision. If I failed, I wouldn't just be hurting myself. I'd be hurting them too. My mom found me staring at the wall, and she said something simple but powerful. Emma, you've already succeeded. You turned pain into purpose. Whatever happens next is just details. Opening day arrived like a storm, terrifying, chaotic, beautiful. We'd done everything we could. The food was prepared, the space was ready, the team was nervous but excited. I stood at the door at 5 p.m., my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. And then I saw them, the line of people waiting to get in, old customers from Mr. Carter's restaurant, friends, family, strangers who'd heard our story. Mrs. Patterson, who'd celebrated her 50th wedding anniversary at the old place, was first in line with tears in her eyes. "We've been waiting for you, Emma," she said. That night, we served 120 people in a space designed for 60. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely magical, but this was just the beginning. And what happened over the next few months would test everything I thought I knew about success, revenge, and what it really means to win. Word spread faster than we ever imagined. Within 2 weeks, local food bloggers were writing about us. A journalist from the city newspaper came and wrote a feature story titled, "From Ashes to Second Chapters: How One Chef Turned Betrayal into Triumph." The article went viral online, and suddenly we had people driving from neighboring towns just to eat at our restaurant. Our story resonated with so many people who'd faced their own betrayals, their own losses, their own moments of having to rebuild from nothing. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about what we represented: hope, resilience, the refusal to stay down when life knocks you flat. The recognition felt surreal. Local TV stations wanted interviews. Food critics who'd never given our old restaurant a second glance were now praising our innovative menu and authentic atmosphere. But the sweetest victory came from our community. People who'd been regulars at Mr. Carter's place became regulars at ours. They told us they could feel the difference. The love, the care, the genuine connection we brought to every dish and every interaction. Mrs. Chen, our landlord, told us she'd never seen a business build such loyal customers so quickly. "It's because you're not treating them like transactions," she said. "You're treating them like family." Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I ran into Derek Walsh at a supplier's warehouse. He looked at me with surprise, clearly having heard about the second chapter's success. "So you're the competition now," he said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the edge in his voice. I smiled and said, "I'm not competing with you, Derek. I'm building something you could never understand." His restaurant had opened 3 weeks after ours, and according to people I knew, it was struggling. The food was mediocre, the service was cold, and the community didn't connect with his vision. Turns out, heart really does beat money. But I didn't gloat or celebrate his struggles. Honestly, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Derek was so focused on profit margins that he'd forgotten why restaurants exist in the first place. They're not just about food. They're about creating spaces where people feel seen, valued, connected. He'd never understand that because he'd never cooked a meal with love, never stayed late to comfort a regular going through a divorce, never celebrated a customer's birthday like it was his own family. His failure wasn't my victory. It was just proof that what we were doing mattered more than quarterly earnings. The real recognition came 3 months after opening when we broke even for the first time. We gathered the whole team after closing one night, looked at the books, and realized we'd done it. We were sustainable. We were profitable. We were succeeding against every odd that had been stacked against us. Tommy popped a bottle of cheap champagne, and we toasted to second chances, to believing in each other, to proving that passion and community will always outlast greed and shortcuts. Standing there with my team, my partners, my friends, my family, I realized something profound. This success meant more than any paycheck from Mr. Carter ever did, because we'd built it together, from scratch, with our own hands and hearts. But the journey wasn't over yet, and the most important lesson was still waiting for me. 6 months into running the second chapter, I finally understood what my dad had meant about outgrowing containers. If you're still watching and this story has touched something in you, drop a like and subscribe because I'm about to share the deepest truth I learned from this entire experience, and it might just change how you see your own struggles and setbacks right now. I wasn't just running a restaurant anymore, I was living my purpose. Every morning I'd walk into that kitchen with genuine excitement, not obligation. I created dishes inspired by my heritage, my travels, my emotions. One night, I developed a recipe based on my grandmother's cooking, and when customers tasted it, they told me it reminded them of home. That's when I realized I wasn't cooking to impress critics or make money or prove anything to anyone. I was cooking to create connection, to tell stories, to make people feel something real. That's the essence I'd lost working for Mr. Carter, and getting it back felt like finding a piece of my soul I didn't know was missing. The second chapter became more than a business. It became a movement. We started a program where we'd donate meals to homeless shelters every Sunday, just like that Thanksgiving memory with Mr. Carter. But this time, we involved our customers. People could buy a pay-it-forward meal for someone in need, and we'd deliver them personally. Within 3 months, we'd served over 500 free meals. Our customers loved being part of something bigger than themselves, and honestly, so did we. This was the impact I'd always wanted to create, but never had the freedom to pursue under someone else's leadership. My relationships deepened in ways I never expected. Maria and I became true partners, finishing each other's sentences in the kitchen, trusting each other completely. Tommy found his calling in creating an atmosphere where every customer felt special. My family ate at the restaurant twice a week, bringing friends and spreading the word. Rachel even quit her corporate job to handle our marketing full-time. We were building something that honored everyone's gifts, where people could show up as their full selves. That's what had been missing before: the freedom to be authentic, to take risks, to care deeply without apologizing for it. But the most profound reconnection was with myself. I'd spent 7 years defining my worth by Mr. Carter's approval, by the restaurant's success, by external validation. Losing all of that forced me to ask, who am I without those things? And the answer surprised me. I was stronger than I thought, more creative, more capable, more resilient. The betrayal and loss hadn't destroyed me. They'd refined me, burned away the parts that weren't truly me, and left behind something pure and powerful. I looked in the mirror 6 months after opening and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked confident, peaceful, alive. She looked free, and I realized that freedom was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself, and finding yourself is the greatest victory of all. 8 months after opening the second chapter, something happened that I never expected. I was closing up one Tuesday night when I saw a figure standing outside, looking through the window. My heart stopped when I recognized him. Mr. Carter. He looked different, older, thinner, like life had beaten him down. For a moment, I considered pretending I hadn't seen him and locking the door. But something in his posture, defeated, humble, broken, made me pause. I unlocked the door and let him in. The air between us was thick with everything unsaid, everything that had shattered between us. He didn't make excuses. He stood there in my dining room and apologized with tears streaming down his face. He told me he'd been in rehab for gambling addiction, that he'd lost everything, his savings, his reputation, his marriage. He said watching me succeed when he'd failed so catastrophically was both painful and beautiful. "You deserved better than what I gave you," he said. "You deserved a mentor who had his life together, not a broken man too proud to ask for help." I'd imagined this confrontation 1,000 times, always picturing myself angry, cold, vindictive. But standing there looking at him, I just felt sad. For him, for what we'd lost, for all the pain his addiction had caused. I offered him coffee, and we sat in the empty restaurant talking for 2 hours. He asked about the journey, and I told him everything. The bankruptcy devastation, Derek's disrespect, my family's intervention, the decision to build something new. He listened with genuine interest and pride, saying things like, "That's the Emma I always knew was in there," and "You were always too talented to stay in my shadow." It was strange hearing him acknowledge what he'd never said when I worked for him. Maybe hitting rock bottom had given him clarity he'd never had before. Maybe losing everything taught him what actually mattered. Before he left, he said something that surprised me. "Emma, I need you to know that my failure wasn't your fault. I see it in your eyes. You still carry guilt, like you should have seen it coming or stopped it somehow. But my addiction was mine to deal with, and I failed. You gave that restaurant everything. You were loyal beyond what I deserved. Don't let my mistakes define your story." Those words released something I didn't know I was holding. I'd been carrying shame that wasn't mine to carry, blame for something I couldn't have prevented. Forgiving him completely in that moment freed us both. As he walked out into the night, I realized something powerful. This confrontation wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about closure, about understanding that hurt people, about recognizing that someone's worst moment doesn't erase their humanity. Mr. Carter taught me to cook with passion, to care about customers, to see the restaurant as more than a business. His addiction stole the ending to that chapter, but it didn't erase the good parts. I could hold both truths at once. He failed me, and he also helped shape me. Life is rarely black and white, and healing means accepting the complicated, messy gray areas in between. That night marked the true end of my old life and the complete embrace of my new one. Success looks different than I thought it would. I used to measure it in reviews, customer counts, profit margins. Those things matter, sure, but they're not what gets me out of bed in the morning. Real success is seeing Tommy mentor a new waiter the same way I wished someone had mentored me. It's Maria experimenting with a new dish and watching her eyes light up when it works. It's the regular customer who told me that our restaurant became her safe place after her husband died. Success is building something that makes people's lives better, even in small ways, even just for an hour over dinner. The contrast between the second chapter and my years at Mr. I. Carter's restaurant couldn't be clearer. Back then, I was talented but powerless, passionate but voiceless, dedicated but unappreciated. Now, I have ownership, literally and figuratively. When we make decisions, we make them together as partners. When we succeed, we all benefit. When we struggle, we face it as a team. This model isn't perfect, and it's definitely harder than just following orders, but it's authentic. And authenticity, I've learned, is the foundation of anything meaningful. You can't build lasting success on someone else's vision. You have to build it on your own truth. Financial success followed emotional and spiritual alignment. By the end of our first year, the second chapter was not just surviving but thriving. We expanded our seating capacity, hired 3 new staff members, and started getting inquiries about franchising our concept. But we said no to rapid expansion. We're not trying to build an empire. We're trying to protect what makes us special. Growth for growth's sake is how you lose your soul. We'd rather stay small, intimate, and excellent than become large, impersonal, and mediocre. That decision confused some business advisors. but it felt right to us, and that's what matters. I also redefined what work-life balance means. Unlike my years working 16-hour days for someone else's dream, I now set boundaries. I take Mondays off. I travel once a quarter for inspiration. I invest in my relationships, my health, my creativity outside the kitchen. Ironically, working less has made me a better chef because I'm not running on empty anymore. I show up rested, inspired, present. My team follows that example, and our restaurant culture reflects it. We don't glorify burnout here. We glorify sustainability, joy, and balance. That's revolutionary in an industry that often eats people alive. The real measure of success hit me during our 1-year anniversary celebration. We invited everyone who'd supported us: family, customers, suppliers, friends. Looking around that room at all the faces, hearing the laughter and stories, feeling the love and community we'd built, I broke down crying. Not sad tears this time, grateful tears. A year ago, I'd been broken, jobless, hopeless. Now I was surrounded by proof that pain can birth purpose, that betrayal can lead to breakthrough, that endings are often disguised beginnings. Derek's cold restaurant closed 6 months after opening. Mr. Carter's gambling destroyed his legacy. But I was standing in a thriving space filled with people who believed in second chances. And that, I realized, is what real success looks like. Not winning against others, but winning back yourself. The biggest lesson I learned through this entire journey is that betrayal reveals character, both in the person who betrays and in the person who survives it. Mr. Carter's gambling showed his weakness, yes, but my response showed my strength. I could have stayed bitter, blamed the world, given up on my dreams. Instead, I chose to rebuild, to trust again, to create something better. That choice wasn't easy or natural. It was daily, deliberate, sometimes minute by minute. But every time I chose hope over resentment, action over paralysis, I was building not just a restaurant but a new version of myself. The person I became through this fire is someone I'm genuinely proud of, and that's worth more than any success I could have achieved the easy way. I learned that loyalty without boundaries is self-destruction. For years, I gave Mr. Carter everything: my time, my creativity, my unwavering dedication, while neglecting my own growth and needs. I thought loyalty meant never questioning, never asking for more, never putting myself first. But that kind of loyalty isn't noble. It's codependent. Real loyalty includes self-respect. It means standing up for your worth, speaking your truth, and walking away when staying means betraying yourself. If I'd understood that earlier, maybe I would have seen the red flags. Maybe I would have protected myself better. But I needed to learn that lesson the hard way. And now it's tattooed on my soul. I discovered that community is everything. When I lost the restaurant, I thought I'd lost everything. But what actually saved me was the network of relationships I'd built over years. Family who showed up, customers who followed me, co-workers who believed in the vision, suppliers who gave me a chance. We live in a culture that glorifies individual achievement, but nobody succeeds alone. Every victory I've experienced with the second chapter has been collective, collaborative, shared. The people who invest in you when you have nothing are your truest treasures. Never forget who stood by you when you were falling. Those are the people you build your empire with. I realize that timing is divine, even when it feels cruel. If the restaurant hadn't collapsed when it did, I would have stayed comfortable, complacent, safe. I would have spent another decade working for someone else's dream, never discovering what I was truly capable of creating. The bankruptcy forced me into an identity crisis that became an identity breakthrough. Sometimes life has to dismantle your plans because your plans were too small. Sometimes doors have to slam shut so you notice the open field you've been walking past. I'm grateful now for the timing of that devastation, not because it didn't hurt, but because it hurt in exactly the way I needed to grow. The hardest lesson was learning to forgive myself. I spent months torturing myself with what-ifs and should-haves. What if I'd confronted Mr. Carter about the rumors earlier? What if I'd saved more money? What if I'd been smarter, more aware, less naive? But beating myself up didn't change the past. It just poisoned my present. Eventually, I had to accept that I did the best I could with the information and maturity I had at the time. Growth means looking back at your younger self with compassion, not contempt. The Emma who worked for Mr. Carter wasn't stupid. She was learning, and every mistake, every misstep, every moment of misplaced trust was preparing me for this moment right here, right now, where I finally understand my own power. Standing here today, running a successful restaurant surrounded by people I love and trust, I barely recognize the woman who cried outside that closed restaurant a year and a half ago. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I want you to hit that subscribe button and like this video right now because your support means everything, and I have so many more stories to share about resilience, recovery, and refusing to let life break you. So make sure you're here for what comes next. My name is Emma Johnson. I'm 29 years old, and I survived betrayal by someone I considered family. But more than surviving, I thrived. I took the worst moment of my life and transformed it into the best decision I ever made. The second chapter isn't just a restaurant. It's proof that your past doesn't determine your future, that other people's failures don't have to become your failures, that you can lose everything and still win if you refuse to give up on yourself. Every plate of food we serve carries that message, and every customer who walks through our doors feels it whether they know the full story or not. Would I go back and change what happened? Part of me wants to say yes, to spare myself the pain, the tears, the sleepless nights wondering if I'd ever be okay again. But honestly, no, I wouldn't change it. That devastation cracked me open in ways success never could. It forced me to examine who I was, what I wanted, what I was willing to fight for. It brought my family closer. It revealed who my real friends were. It taught me that I'm capable of so much more than I ever imagined. If I hadn't lost everything, I never would have discovered that I had everything I needed inside me all along. Courage, creativity, resilience, vision. The restaurant industry will tell you that most new restaurants fail within the first year. We didn't just survive, we flourished. Not because we had more money or better luck than anyone else, but because we built something real, something with soul, something that mattered beyond profit margins. We proved that treating people with dignity, creating genuine community, and leading with heart isn't just nice, it's good business. Derek's corporate approach failed because it had no heart. Mr. Carter's restaurant failed because addiction destroyed his judgment. But the second chapter succeeded because it was built on a foundation of authenticity, partnership, and purpose. Those things can't be faked or bought. They have to be lived. So let me ask you, what would you do if everything you built suddenly disappeared? Would you crumble, or would you rebuild? Would you stay stuck in bitterness, or would you transform pain into power? After hearing my story, I hope you realize that you're stronger than you think, that endings are just new beginnings in disguise, that your greatest comeback is always on the other side of your worst breakdown. If you're going through something difficult right now, don't give up. Your second chapter is waiting, but you have to be brave enough to turn the page. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of people who refuse to let life defeat them, and turn on notifications because I'll see you in the next video, where I'll share what happened when 3 major investors tried to buy the second chapter, and the shocking decision we made that changed everything. Until then, keep fighting, keep believing, and remember, your story isn't over until you say it is.